Welcome to Solutions Rising. I'm Rachel Branch, and once again, I am joined today with Mr. H. John Fisher, the Fair Housing Manager of Wayfinders in Springfield. And John has been with me for many programs, and I'm so glad that he is here again, and we're going to talk about the Fair Housing 2023 and Civil Rights Conference 2023 that is going to take place from Tuesday, April 11th through Thursday, April 13th. And we were also going to talk about the housing realities that we are both in, all of us around are seeing every day. Thank you, John.
Yeah, I think probably as a spoiler alert, we're not going to solve them in that amount of time we have for today. I'm sorry.
I know. I guess I'll just keep having
I
you
think you
come
just
back
have to
and
keep
come
doing
back, and
this.
we'll keep throwing out
Okay.
solutions. But this is an attempt at solutions, and every little bit might help.
Well, thank you. And just real quickly, the Fair Housing and Civil Rights Conference is something that 17 years ago we had a little morning, little morning workshop on predatory lending, and it went really well. So we said, let's do it again the following year, and it kind of grew into this. At this point, it's a national conference. It has been the last 3 years, and it will be this year as well, only virtual. The 2024 conference will be in person, and that will be streamed live, so that, because it really has become a national conference, it allows people.
Actually, international.
Actually international. No, we've gotten
Sri Lanka?
Yeah, we've had people from South Africa, Canada, Spain, and Sri Lanka also attend, as a matter of fact. But this is, I think it's going to be a really great conference. This year, the keynote speakers, the first one is going to be Chad Dion Lassiter, who I believe you know. Chad,
Yes,
I think he did a
Chad
show with
is-
you once.
Yes.
Yes, he's the executive director of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, and he is an incredibly dynamic speaker. We've had him keynote for us once before, and he's done a couple of workshops for us along the way. So he will be our Tuesday keynote speaker. I got my list right here to get everything in the proper order.
He's a phenomenal speaker, but he also brings so much to the table.
Oh, yes.
It's just, the audience will just really learn from him, and his commitment is also,
Yeah,
it shows sincerely.
he's incredible. He's a wonderful speaker, and he's really good at making sometimes concepts really clear. And he's a marvelous teacher as well. Anyway, Wednesday we're going to have Jill Ashton, who is the Northeast Regional Administrator for the Department of Labor, and again, before she went to work for DOL. She actually was Executive Director of the Massachusetts Commission for the Status of Women. Before that, an activist on women's rights. Very specifically in Massachusetts, we have the Equal Pay Act, which is really, she was one of the moving people behind having that put through. So that, again, she's, I think, going to be a very interesting speaker. And our wrap up on Thursday for the keynote is going to be Demetria McCain, who we've had in the past. She's, I have to get this right because HUD has titles at least 20 words long, but Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Housing and Equal Opportunity. And really, but her background is she worked with the Inclusive Communities Project in Dallas, Texas. She's really kind of been working in the trenches before she came to work with HUD more recently. So those are our keynotes.
Sounds like you have a stellar group of speakers.
I think we do. And let me just quickly run through this.
We want to know the workshops.
The workshops are probably, I'm just going to do them by name. But basically, let's see if I do. First day will be Housing First for Survivors of the Sex Trade, which again is pretty self-explanatory. The Small Business Administration, Jeffrey Smith from there is going to be doing and accessing procurement opportunities. And this is really working with people, minorities, or just people who've been traditionally disadvantaged, and things that they can do to get them started and actually become involved in owning their own businesses, and really that becomes a very much of a civil rights action as well. Detangling Dobbs, which is really the recent Supreme Court decision outlawing abortion and sort of what that means. There's a workshop on that. Do evictions defund schools? It really, this is the Massachusetts Landlords Group, which has been tracking a lot of variables and really is really talking about the relationship between what happens in housing stability and really just how well the neighborhood is, how, what's available to people. These things are so intertwined, as you well know.
Wasn't this person a speaker last year?
Yes, he was.
Yes, and also, I'm really glad that who is it?
Doug Quattacci.
Yeah, I'm quite sure I'll be interested in the data from like last year to this year, and we'll talk about housing realities and evictions.
Yes.
You and I will.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, really, we deal as much with the personal of it, but this is also really looking, pardon me, looking at the pattern of it. And you're really, what does it mean, and sort of how it fits together in the overall. There'll be a workshop on the freedom of access to clinic and clinic entrances, which will be with Amy Romero's a U.S. Attorney's office in Rhode Island. Pepper Deigler is a FBI agent who's been working with that sort of stuff.
Are you talking about clinic access for
The
women's
right
health
to have
care?
yes, and being
okay.
able to get into there. Just the what's been done to try to block it. Testing and key considerations about gender identity and expression will be a workshop. My associate and friend Jamie Williamson, who used to come from here, is now with.
Jamie has also been on
Jamie's
Solutions
alumna
Rising.
as well, yes. And she's going to be each opening day. She's going to be doing a little interview first thing off in the morning, including one of the people who will be there is Jeffrey Paul May, who has been very active again around housing issues, and particularly working with zoning and getting permitted. Allowing housing for people to be developed. We'll have a workshop on library services and just the democracy in crisis, if you will, there because of the interference with the functioning of libraries, banning of books and so forth. Being a librarian used to be a very quiet job. And now they found themselves very much in the center of things.
Well, they did after the Patriot Act, particularly to protect people's access to books without having that announced, or the FBI be able to get lists of people and what they were reading.
Yeah. And so anyway, this is we're going to be going into this. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, is going to be doing a listening session that's really going to be talking about, again, problems people have run into and actually what people's rights are in terms of being discriminated in the workplace and so forth. There'll be a workshop on fair housing resources through HUD and various obligations under the Fair Housing Act. I and Michelin Cahill from the Community Legal Aid will be teaching our annual Fair Housing 101, which is sort of an introduction to how fair housing, federal and state laws fit together. Jamie Williamson is also going to be doing a workshop on unconscious bias and just really understanding sort of what that is, because that's the subtle undercurrent of these things that we're dealing with. It's not always as open as it used to be. Again, a workshop on the problem with people who have a housing voucher, overcoming discriminatory challenges faced by them. The fact that although it's illegal in Massachusetts, many other states, to discriminate against somebody because they have a housing voucher, a lot of it still does go on. A work group in Connecticut that's been working with fair housing enforcement. Also, there's going to be a workshop on minority owners and, if you will, their rights, minority business owners and their rights. A guide for undocumented immigrants post-arrival. Again, sort of an introduction to how HUD works, Fair Housing More Than Just Works. And then finally, the Future of Civil Rights, which is our kind of one of our annual closing workshops, which is Bob Terrell from the Boston Housing Authority, Nadine, now working actually with the City of Boston, Nadine Cohen, who is works with consumer rights issues, Greater Boston Legal Services, Whitney Demetrius, who's Director of Fair Housing Engagement for the Citizens Housing and Planning Association, and James Jennings, who's Emeritus Professor at Tufts University, and they really try to pull everything together and see where we've been in the past year. So that's the conference. And just real quickly, I should probably say, I don't want to spend too much more time on this.
That's okay.
But if you are interested in attending, it's quite easy. If you go to www.fhcrconference.com.
And I think they will put that on the screen.
Again, www.fhcrconference.com. You can register for the conference. It's quite easy. And then we're doing it a little bit differently this year. Once you register, you come back and there'll be a kind of a listing of the workshops, and you can essentially get the link to each workshop that you want to go to during the conference.
And you don't have to do each one separately, which
You
is
don't have to
really,
do each one separately.
which is really
Yeah.
nice. Yeah, there it is.
We're trying to streamline it a little bit anyway.
Yep, yep. And of course, we were hoping we would have one day at least open this in person, but if we have to
we
wait,
thought
there
of
are
that, but
still
it's-
a lot of illnesses going around,
There-
and I think that
exactly.
is being very cautious.
And I think we ended up feeling that it was probably just as safe for everybody for
Yeah.
us to kind of hold off for one more year. Again, we are definitely not going to be just doing it in person, but we will be doing it in person. And as I say, then we will be streaming it live as well next year. But for now, it's quite easy. You can watch it from the convenience of your own home.
Which is quite nice.
Yes.
You can get up and have a little lunch. Will most of them be recorded so that people can watch them after the conference also?
As much as possible. Again, in some cases, if we get the permission of all the presenters, we do a recording of it, which is on the website. Again, you go to the conference website, www.fhcrconference.com. And if you look under resources, you'll see some of the past workshops we've had, and we will try and put as many of them up as we can afterwards.
That's wonderful. And
And there's no charge for this, by the way, ever.
Yes.
That's
which is
the other nice thing.
it's really wonderful. Well, we missed the gathering and having lunch together,
Yes.
but we'll do it in spirit.
Yeah, so I'm afraid there's no free lunch this year.
Yes. I like to tie all this together as we go into housing realities, which is, we would probably have done more just on the Fair Housing and Civil Rights Conference, but there is so much going on in housing.
Yes.
And of course, my pictures here of Nagasaki, the young child with the baby, and that famous, which probably helped stop the Vietnam War, that little 8-year-old girl is now head of her foundation called the Kim Foundation in Canada, and she raises money for healing youth who have been hurt by war. And what we have in money for war could solve all these problems. And I can't speak enough about this, how dangerous and damaging it is, but all of this is connected to insecure housing, food insecurity,
Yes,
what is
yes.
happening in the Commonwealth. I have newspapers here, the effects of even children in DCF, not having places to stay, winding up in hospitals. What needs to be done about the housing crunch? Should we build more construction of public housing? What's happening to home equity of people over unpaid taxes losing their homes? All the things that there are articles recently in the Boston Sunday Globe about people losing their homes as their rent goes up. I mean, it just goes on and on. And I am concerned and also involved in what's happening to the elderly and disabled people. And there are many fights going on across the Commonwealth because of what is happening to people who are elderly and disabled, and the fears they have of coming forward and the retaliation that happens as the result of it. I don't know where you want to pick up any of this.
I'm almost going to suggest and turn the tables on you a little bit here. It is so all interconnected, first of all.
Yes.
So that you can't, that's why, again, we started out talking about a fair housing conference, and become very quickly fair housing and civil rights conference. You know, issues of poverty, issues of inequity, issues of what our priorities are, they all sort of fit together. And I know before we started, we were talking a little bit about some of the stuff, some things that you had encountered recently. And could maybe you talk just a little bit about what you were telling me about in terms of your experience and other people's experience? Let me interview you a little bit here.
All right. And this is going on over a year now of having filed a complaint about what is happening where I'm living, and because of the owners not having the proper amount in my savings.
Could you explain just a little bit about your living situation? I'm not going to ask you your address or something. Please do not come and knock on our door at 10 o'clock at night to have a conversation. But
well, I've been living in a low-income senior housing for elderly and disabled people, and I have been almost 4 years now. And this began because of some bullying by a person working there. And you know, and I'm pretty easy. I make my living place. I've been told nobody wants me to leave because it's always better when I stay there. A lovely little village. The owners are not responding to complaints, and this part of it was because the rules for COVID, the governor's rules for COVID protocols were not being followed. I complained about that.
That's particularly important in a senior
really
complex.
Important. Roundup had been being used for years, and I saw it and I complained about that. And then when the recertification came, $12,700 was added to my savings that I did not have, and under advice of counsel, I would not sign the recertification papers. As a result of that, I was threatened with eviction. I'm 80, almost 81 years old now. There were other complaints that people, I have a complaint that's about 3 or 4 pages with 33 supporting documents going on. I've worked in law for over 20 years. I was an administrator at a law school, so I knew how to put this together. I actually, at one point, this is a pending complaint that I cannot get resolved, and I've gone to the Massachusetts Commission against discrimination, and they cannot take it because it's pending. I have also been to a conference, a law school conference, where they have a clinical program. They cannot take it because they have so many complaints. And I think this is one of the problems, is finding legal counsel that can handle it. And if you're low income, it has to be pro bono. So I am able to put all this together. But this has gone on even to this day. And the retaliation from the owners and their representatives has been extreme and very painful.
Is this private ownership, or is this
private ownership?
Privately owned, but
subsidized by HUD.
Housing, yes.
Yes, subsidized by HUD. And the complaint got pushed to several different places. One of them right back to the person we're supposed to be able to complain to. Even the owners, when I complained, they said, we're not getting any complaints. Why would people complain to you? I said they complained to me because at the time I was a candidate for mayor, and people would come to me. But of course, people at this stage in their life do not want to be involved because it threatens their home. And my home was gone into and left open one afternoon. And as COVID's going on, and asked that people be covered and masked, and then my home was left open. So there's a multitude of problems
Right,
here.
let me just kind of interject here too,
Yeah.
because it's just for people watching, that you're sort of ticking off little violations of policy and law as you go along. I mean, among things, first of all, and this was particularly true during the height of COVID, I mean, still is to some extent yet, but obviously if somebody has a disability, and disability has a very wide definition, there always needs to be a reasonable accommodation made to that. So if someone, for example, has either compromised immune system or is just of an age or what have you, where it's they are at greater risk, and specifically when they ask for someone to make a reasonable accommodation of that needs to be taken very seriously and dealt with.
The concern I have is, and I'm disabled and people don't realize that, I was hit in rear-ended in an auto accident.
Yeah.
I have been in ongoing medical care since right after 9/11 and will be for the rest of my life. But I am also a multi-rape victim survivor. And when my apartment, I never thought at this stage in my life I would be fighting for the sanctity of my home.
Yes, yeah.
And so these are things that I would really, I'm quite sure under fair housing and civil rights must be legally unacceptable.
Right. And of course, one of the things I think I'm hearing you're saying also that you run into is the fact that although some of these laws are there, and again, because of your sophistication, your background, and understanding the law, it becomes something that you're willing to step up. A lot of people aren't, particularly, again, obviously, the less financial resources you have, in some ways, sometimes the older you are, the sicker you are, the more vulnerable you feel. So that becomes a huge problem of people not standing up for their rights. And the other piece of this that I really see in this is that although those rights are there, even when you necessarily put them forward, it is, again, if you will, the laws are there getting down to them, their implementation on a very basic level. It's very not necessarily the best oversight that you can see in enforcing those laws. And sometimes the people who are supposed to be doing them on the ground level tend to either not understand them or just think that they can kind of ignore them. And then the other thing I see, and this I get reported to me a lot, is that people will, they will take it personally, so that then you get on their blacklist almost.
Oh, I'm definitely
You're a
on
troublemaker,
blacklist.
essentially.
Yes.
Yeah, so all of those pieces are there.
So which makes me vulnerable, I am more vulnerable and still retaliated again. And, part of what you're talking about, it needs to, which might be very interesting to talk about at the conference, is the local level enforcement and accountability. The fact that I am now going into my second year fighting this, and I had to put it aside for a little bit because you can only take it on so long, but you go to elected officials, you go to the city, nobody responds. They listen, they take it, they don't answer. And I mean, that's egregious.
Yeah, and again, unfortunately, although they're wonderful people, a lot of the people who work with the legal assistance offices and that sort of thing are stretched way too thin. They're just hugely underfunded.
We don't have the attorneys for legal aid or civil clinics, or, well, just as I was talking about in the law school. But I really hope that there will be some digging into what the actual, I mean, there must be fair housing and civil rights protections for abuse against elders and disabled people.
What I mean, this is not a solution to anything, but I think perhaps, in the 2024, we've got the we got all the workshops set up, but perhaps you might be interested in coming and maybe.
I would be honored.
Yeah, and
to
that
come.
might be a very interesting workshop to
Yes.
really, on the very ground level, what the problem is. Because you have, I think so many of the people working in these agencies, they want to do well. They're there to try to do well. They're there by choice to try and make a difference. But as it kind of gets down more and more on the ground level, sometimes it works very well. If you happen to be fortunate enough to have someone who really understands the regulations and how they should be implemented. But it sometimes gets a little bit hard on a where the rubber hits the road, if you will.
Yep.
And I think that is a.
Though there are some that I have contacted that have said nothing denies the merit of my case. People, Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination, the attorney there was lovely. They were lovely to me. People at Suffolk University Law School were lovely to me and helpful, and gave me also other ideas to explore. But I really think part of it might be staffing on every day to the local level for HUD and all these civil rights and fair housing communities. We're running out of time again, John.
Yes, don't we always?
Yes, don't we all? And I know we have to, in fact, next month, right after, we need to do another program on housing realities. And I just hope and look forward to the Fair Housing Conference being able to provide some of the day-to-day ways and how people, I know there's a man working across the state also on bullying, trying to get an ombudsman, but whomever gets in power, elected, appointed, whatever, has to have the authority to stop what is happening to elders and seniors and others who are being damaged so badly by what is happening in housing. It's a huge housing crisis.
It really come to the point also where on a certain level, you don't have the resources to address the fact that the resources don't exist.
Yep. To be continued,
Yes.
obviously. Thank you so much, John Fisher. I am really, really grateful every time you come here.
Pleasure as
And
always.
if each one of us picked up one problem and solved it, imagine the incredible view we would all have of solutions rising. We are going to continue talking about solutions on housing, fair housing, civil rights, and the needs you as our audience might have, and we hope every program we do is helpful in some way. Thank you very much. Thank you, John.
Thank you.